Welcome to End of Life University on YouTube. I'm so glad you're joining me today. I'm sharing with you a conversation I had with Alua Arthur. She is an internationally known death doula. She's the author of a brand new book, Perfectly Human, published by Harper Collins. We're talking all about the book and about her amazing work in the world. And I know you're going to really enjoy getting to know Alua. Her website is goingwithgrace.com if you want to check that out. Make sure you subscribe to this channel down below. That's really helpful. Also, subscribe and leave a rating and review for the podcast wherever you happen to listen. And you can go to eoluniversity.com/support if you're interested in making a small contribution to help keep this show and the podcast on the air. And now we'll move on with my conversation with Alua Arthur. Today, I'm so excited to welcome my very special guest, Alua Arthur, who was on the show 6 years ago, we realize, which seems like forever now. And I want to read her bio so that we can all catch up on all the great things that she's been doing over these past 6 years. Alua is the most visible and active death doula working in America today. She is a recovering attorney and the founder of Going with Grace, a death doula training and end of life planning organization. A frequent guest on TV and radio, Alua has been featured on CBS's The Doctors and in Disney's Limitless docuseries with Chris Hemsworth, as well as in national print media outlets such as Vogue, InStyle, The Los Angeles Times, The Cut, The New Yorker, and The New York Times. She has appeared on dozens of podcasts, and a Refinery 29 video feature on Alua and her work received 10 million views across social platforms. Wow. In non pandemic times, she travels the country and world as a keynote speaker, addressing audiences of several hundred to several thousand people at medical and end of life conferences, universities, seminaries, senior citizens communities, and more. And also, Alua is the author of this book, which is just being released within a few weeks, I think, after we speak. Briefly, Perfectly Human, a beautiful memoir. And you can learn more about Alua and her work at the website goingwithgrace.com. So, Alua, welcome and thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Karen. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm really glad it worked out. I know you're busy right now doing lots of interviews for your book, but from your bio, obviously you're busy all the time. You have a lot going on.
Yeah, I've been busy for a few years now, but I also find it to be a tremendous point of gratitude to be in service in this way to our work overall and to be out there talking about the work of the doula so more people come to find us and seek services.
Well, I initially wanted to interview you about your memoir, Briefly Perfectly Human, because I chose it for my online reading group, A Year of Reading Dangerously. And so I wanted to have a conversation about the book, but then there are also so many other things for us to talk about as well. But I will say it's a beautifully written memoir, and I love the way you've woven together personal stories from your own life along with stories of people that you've worked with at the end of life. It's very beautifully done.
Thank you. Thank you. It was quite the labor, but also of like love overall and poetry and art and all those things. So thank you.
Hmm. Yes, it's so beautiful. And you just share in such a raw and real way your story and what you've lived through and what's happened in your life. And I appreciate that so much. And I know as someone who tries to write as well, it's not that easy always to be so vulnerable in your writing.
It isn't. But you know what helped a lot was when I was writing, I was not thinking about anybody reading it. I was just getting out what needed to get out. And often I was sitting in a room by myself, someplace far away, like in the mountains of Silverthorne, by myself, looking at something beautiful and click, clack, clacking and wiping snot and tears and laughing, making myself laugh through the jokes. I was doing it for myself, really. So it made it much easier when I wasn't thinking about the fact that it was going to be read by somebody. But I'll tell you what, now that the book is actually coming out, I am having to surrender deeply into all the vulnerability, knowing that people are now going to read my most sacred and intimate and scary and sad, but also really beautiful moments.
Mm. I totally understand that. I'm trying to write something right now that's requiring me to be vulnerable in that same way, and I'm up and down every single day. Like, do I even want anyone to know about do I even want to say this to anyone? And yet the value of your honesty and authenticity, it's just unsurpassed I can relate to it on such a deep human level, and that's really powerful.
Thank you so much for that, Karen. That was really my hope. You know, it is terrifying to put myself out there in that way, but I talked to both my parents about this because there are things in there that I don't think any parent ever wants to read about their child. And so I just kind of prepped them before. And both of them just came to the same place. Well, is it useful? Is it going to be useful? And I said, I hope so. You know, the only reason to share all parts of myself like that, to be that transparent, is in hopes that maybe somebody feels a little less alone in their journey and their struggles and the things that they have a hard time with. And maybe also that they can feel more comfortable sharing those parts of themselves. Because I feel like being in conversation and community around the things that hurt and are challenging for us just make it much easier to shoulder because we're not carrying it alone.
Mhm. Wow, so true, and I will say, as someone also trying to write as I described, having read your memoir, it's actually really inspiring for me to think it's okay to go that deep and to be that authentic because that's the actual truth of our lives when we really share what life is like, and if we try to put a glossy coating over everything, we're not really sharing the truth, we're trying to make things look better for someone else.
Exactly. And I feel like that's part of the challenges that we have with death and dying in this culture anyway, is that we shove all the things that seem scary or difficult or low away. But I don't understand necessarily how we determine which ones are okay to share and which ones aren't. I can understand the human desire to appear like we've got it all figured out, knowing that none of us actually do. Um, but it does us all a disservice by pretending these things aren't happening. Certainly, I think it impacts why we are so death phobic in this culture. We don't talk about it, we don't look at it, we don't discuss it at all. And I wish we would.
Yeah. And one thing that came clear to me from reading the book is that your life experiences actually prepared you for the people that you end up helping at the end of life and how well they tie together and what you've learned from going through what life has offered to you and then how you can utilize it when you're working with someone else and that is just true beauty.
Yeah, I thank you for that a lot. It's the work. It's showing up for the other in hope to support the other. And if I can do so in the written form and I don't have to be there in person, then that can go a really, really long way, which is part of the reason why I wanted to write, um, just to get it out so that somebody can still have words and something to hang on to, even in their aloneness.
Mm. And one thing I love about books is that people can read them at any time of the night or day and read as little or as much as they want. They can put it down and come back to it over and over and over again. So that book really becomes a companion to people and can serve them wherever they happen to be on their journey.
Yes, that's my hope. I also just kind of tickled at somebody sitting on a beach someplace, like a warm, beautiful climate, reading a book about death. It really tickles me.
I know, I know. I love that idea, and we need so much of that. We need so many more people reading books about death wherever they happen to be as we try to normalize this conversation more.
It goes a long way to just injecting it into part of the everyday, so it doesn't just have to be privately or quietly, just with your best friend someplace dark and sad and lonely, but rather on a birthday celebration in Saint-Tropez.
Yeah, someone sitting next to you on the train, and, I was it a train or a bus? I just the story that you start off with early in the book about, first of all, almost getting hit by a taxi cab in Cuba and then meeting your friend, it's Jessica, is I
Yeah.
have that right? And finding out she was on the taxi cab that almost hit you, and that's wow. That is the most incredible story. It still gives me goosebumps to think about it. But life just has these events sometimes that stop you in your tracks and make you reevaluate everything you're doing.
All the time. All the time. I think I wish we were more aware of them and we would give them a lot more credence, because there is magic in like the regular things that are happening all the time. It seemed like a series of unrelated events at the time. I must get hit by a car. And then later I go to the bus stop and then I start chatting with this woman. And this one conversation shifted the trajectory of my life, the entire thing, the whole thing. I was on one path, and just by chance, I'm now on another one entirely, and a path that gives me so much fulfillment and joy and like purpose and direction. Yeah, it's possible constantly.
Wow. And on both sides of that conversation, not being afraid to ask questions of people that you meet on the bus and to not be afraid to answer the questions because Jessica was dealing with cancer. And I think that was just kind of mind blowing for you to see how she was handling that traveling in her last months of life.
Absolutely. I think it's important, like you were saying, to also not be afraid to ask the questions. If somebody doesn't want to say, they just won't say. I think most of us won't share if we don't feel like sharing, but if we never make the invitation for somebody to share, then it's definitely not happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So plan ahead. If you're reading this book on the beach, what when someone says, "Oh, what are you reading?" You're going to say, "I'm reading a book about death because I'm really interested in learning about it."
Yes, please. More of that, please.
Because you never know where that will take you. So that story in Cuba with the taxi cab and Jessica, that's really where your journey started. Um, and then when did you decide to get death doula training? I was real excited to learn that you got training from Olivia Barham, but tell us what inspired you to get that training.
After I came back from Cuba, my brother-in-law, Peter St. John, became ill. He was my older sister's husband, and I got to support him through the end of his life. And all the things that had started to form in my mind when I was in Cuba on that bus with Jessica became very real. All of a sudden, here we were, we felt so alone and so isolated in his diagnosis and in his dying process. And I was angry about it. I wish that we'd had some more support. I didn't understand why we were left to deal with this thing. We felt like we were on our own. This was our first time doing this as a family. Nobody was equipped. I felt like somebody who had some skills or some training or something should be there. So after he died, I grieved for a while, but I also shared my feelings about there needing to be somebody present at that time with my therapist. And she suggested this program because she knew somebody who had gone to an intro session. So I called Olivia up and I asked her if I could come to the intro session. It was that night, and she told me it was full and that when the next one was. And I begged and I begged and I begged. I told her I'd bring my own cushion, I'd bring my own snacks, I'd bring my own water. I would make myself as small as possible. I should not take up any of the room. And she said, okay, fine. You convinced me, come along. And to this day, I have also so much gratitude that she just said yes. Who knows if I just would have let the interest wane had I not gone to the interest session last night. But I went to Olivia sessions and my heart blew wide open.
Wow. And at each step along the way, just kind of listening to your intuition, kind of going into the unknown in a way, not knowing what you would learn or what you would experience there.
Yeah. And what I experienced there was I left laughing and dancing and crying and being terrified, which is such a beautiful mix of experiences, I think, for a human, right? For me, it was an indication that I needed to keep going in that direction because it sparked everything within me. I was totally lit up, for lack of a better way to put it. So it was clear that there was something powerful there. And I am forever grateful to Olivia for allowing me into that session because I was a pain in the butt.
And I know like you're a recovering attorney and that after just knowing you and reading your book, you're a very creative person. And I can imagine that being in law may have felt like you were being shoved into a box, that you couldn't use the creativity as much as you might have needed to in your life. And it seems to me working with death and dying allows space for all the creativity and uniqueness that each one of us has to bring. But what are your thoughts on that?
100%. I think the act of living is a creative act in and of itself. I never thought of myself as creative, even though when I practiced law, I'd still like draw little funky designs on my nails to the extent that I could and then take it off before I had to go to court. but I never thought of myself as creative necessarily until I started to look big picture at our lives. And every day we live is an act of creation. Being born is an act of creation, but also we're crafting our lives at every moment. So we're all creative in that way. We're all artists in that way. And being able to honor somebody at the end of life means honoring the art that they made with their life. And honoring it is an act of art as well, like how we go about doing it. Olivia's course was called The Art of Death Midwifery at the time. I don't know if it still is, but it is. It's a sacred art. It's a sacred art. And being able to honor people at the end also feels like art. It's just space for creation.
Oh, exactly. And really, if you think about how death opens that space for us to be creative because there's nothing else. I mean, we acknowledge like, okay, this is it. Death is coming. This is it. I don't need to wait. I can't put this off and wait 2 or 3 months down the road and then I'll try it. This is my time. This is now. So if I'm going to try something different or new or express myself, this is now when I need to do it.
Absolutely. I really enjoy the urgency, not in a hustle culture way that death creates in our lives, because I think it also creates urgency for rest and taking care of ourselves and our bodies, which hustle culture doesn't necessarily do. And so when we're thinking about our death, then it's like, well, I have an opportunity to create what I want, but I don't want to wait till tomorrow because I'm not certain I have a tomorrow. Nobody promised me one. So may as well start now.
Mm. And that's such an interesting conundrum in a way when I think about those of us who care for people who are dying. We ourselves may not do as good a job of taking care of ourselves in the midst of doing this work. I think that's just one of the part of the paradox of working in this end of life space that most of us actually kind of need to learn how to care for ourselves and how to do that.
Absolutely. I think it's a big invitation because for so long, I mean, when I was caring for my brother-in-law, I think even when I was in the practice of law, I would do anything that the client needed. I would just go just extra, extra, extra. And a supervisor at work once told me that I needed to slow down and check in to see where that was coming from. I mean, she also told me to separate myself from the client and make sure that I wasn't doing everything that I thought the client needed, but rather I was doing what the client actually needed. Um, Early on in my practice, I said to a caregiver, please take care of yourself. And she got so mad at me. Now I understand why. Because she was like, don't you think I'm trying? And how can I? And I thought, oh shit, she's right. She's right. I've now begun to think about the way that we care for ourselves while in the act of caring for other people around our boundaries, shoring them up. So many of us that come to this work are highly empathic and think of ourselves as like very porous. I can feel what you're feeling and it's breaking my heart, so I want to support you in it. But this work has reminded me consistently to find my own edges and my own boundaries and my own pores so that I can make sure that what belongs to me are the only things that stick with me. And that's an act of caring for myself too.
Mm. I love that. And I from the book, I think you wrote your mentor said, protect your heart. And I really like just that notion, like that sticks in my mind. And I think about that, like, wait, is what I'm doing right now, am I protecting my own heart enough? Because I can't function if I don't offer that protection to myself.
Absolutely. Also, I think protect our bodies. Protect the bodies, like honor the need for rest, for water, for food, for exercise, for sunshine, for looking at beautiful things, for hearing things that move us, for touching things that feel good, for oxytocin, for serotonin, for dopamine, like protect the body as well.
Mm. Yeah, such a good reminder. And another thing that you wrote about that I think is really important is being able to meet people where they are. Because I imagine most of us who have worked in this field for a while have had the experience trying to force people to be where we
Mhm.
think they should be and learning the hard way that that doesn't really work.
Ooh, not me. What could you possibly be talking about? I've never done that before. Yeah, yeah, it's tricky. I find myself still struggling with that sometimes, though, in my personal life, because as a doula, I've learned that everybody's path into their existential questions is their own path, and my job is just to support them along the way. Yet personally, sometimes I try to help friends that need to break up with a partner that's toxic for them, or my dad, even as he has end stage kidney disease now, and I want to force him to talk about the end of his life and the things that he needs. And I must continue just to allow humans to move at their own pace, because by not doing so, it sends a message that I don't trust them with their own journey. I can
Mm.
be here. I can be here while somebody figures it out. And I may not know what's right for them, actually.
It's so true because no one path or journey is right for everyone. And I have a similar issue. A friend who's dealing with a brain tumor, who does not at all want to talk about end of life issues. And I know when she sees me coming, it's like, oh no, oh no, there's the person who's probably going to ask me. And I have made a promise to myself. I don't ask her. I don't push. She knows that I could talk to her about that. If and when she's ready, she can seek me out, and she knows I'll be the person who will listen and, can help her on that journey. But maybe she isn't going to be ready, and I just have to accept that.
Ever. And it's so painful to watch, isn't it? Because there have been people that I've been called to support. I mean, let me back up. A key component of the work is that people have some awareness that death is approaching. And yet, sometimes, if I'm not working with the client themselves, the person who's dying themselves, but I'm working with somebody in their family or in their constellation of care, that means sometimes just being present with them as the person that they care for is just going to waltz right into death, denying and frustrated and not ready to talk about it. And it's hard. It's
Mhm.
hard. It's hard. Yeah.
And
But I think it requires us to get in touch with the part of us that wants to fix something for somebody or make it better somehow, where we don't actually have the capacity to do so, you know?
and it's so true. And maybe that comes down to compassion, like you were talking about, more so than empathy, because empathy might push us like, oh, what you're going through hurts me too, so let's fix that.
Yeah,
But compassion allows us to stand, maybe take a step back and to witness their journey, be there for them in their support network as much or little as they need, but not push them.
absolutely. To get in the trench with them. I think compassion is not only the most healing force on the planet. I think it's I think it's really supportive for these times that we find ourselves in, which sometimes feel a little vitriolic and difficult. And there's all this stuff going on out there in the world. But if I can be compassionate with everybody's process, if I can stay in my compassion, I may not understand your experience, but I see that it is difficult for you. I see that you're really deep in this, and I'm going to continue to honor you from where you are. That can change the trajectory of everything, I believe.
Mm,
But I'm a
yes.
dreamer. I'm a dreamer.
Well, and I love it. And you have stories of exactly that, of people that you've worked with when you've had to allow them to be where they are and experience their own process. And at least in one of the stories, the woman, I think shortly before she died, came around and said, oh, in reality, I'm not actually going to get to go to that. I'm not going to get to go to that show. I'm not going to get to go see that dance. And she
Yeah.
finally recognized and accepted, but it was when she was ready to accept it.
It's still heartbreaking for me, but it worked because it worked in her time. We can't force another to look at their life. We can't force another to be ready to talk about their death. All we can do, all we should do, I think, and I use the word should very sparingly, but I really think that what we should do is to just acknowledge another's journey for exactly what it is without my commentary or my ideas about what I think they could be doing.
And I know one of the questions that you asked yourself in the book is, can this career as a death doula be viable in this current world? And I ask that all the time, and I don't know the answer yet. I don't know. Are we there? Are we, or do you have tips for how people can make it more viable?
I think we're getting close. There's a few things that come to mind when thinking about this. Is for starters, well, let me say this. Before my work became very publicly known, I was making enough money to sustain myself, but I also had gotten very used to living on a part-time legal aid lawyer salary. So I was not making a lot of money, but it was enough for me to sustain myself. I lived with somebody. I had enough money for food and for wine and for travel occasionally. But I also had multiple streams of income. I worked at an alternative funeral home. I worked to help support build a social model hospice. I held workshops. I did end of life planning consultations. I sat bedside. I got a license to sell life insurance to learn how the life insurance process worked. And so I was doing all those different things to build a full-time, for me, salary. So I think it's difficult for folks that want to enter into doula work and just sit bedside or just do end of life planning and call that a full-time salary. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. But I was doing enough work in the field that supported my pockets and my bank account. And
And go
oh,
ahead.
okay, another thing I think that is wildly important for us to remember is that the culture is shifting around how we talk about death and people's desire to have a death doula. Like people are learning about it a lot more. Now, when I mention I'm a death doula, people say, oh, my cousin is one or my sister is one. Whereas before it used to be like, what are you talking about? And so it's shifting. We're seeing it on TV, et cetera. And so I think that what's going to make the key difference between the people that are able to make a viable, I'm using air quotes, but a career out of this work is consistency and perseverance. Like we just have to not stop. Yeah,
I think you're exactly right. Not get discouraged in the trenches when we're there. And then I think too persisting with education of the public and the community and doing things like writing books and doing podcasts and speaking, because that's how we help educate people who may love the idea of having a death doula. They've just never heard of it before.
exactly. And how are people going to come and find us if they don't know that we exist? Like, how are people going to come and find you in your community if they don't know that you're there and you exist? I think the element of public education needs to be at the forefront of most of the work that we're doing. Not only will it do the public education, you also find clients that way. That's
Yeah.
how I came across mine.
Yeah, so very true. And when I very first met you, I think you were creating a curriculum for a
Yes,
university class. That's when I first met you, which is fantastic. I would love to see that. I would love to see classes on end of life in every college and university, every high school, so that we start with people at a young age, educating them.
absolutely. I think it's so necessary. It's like a crucial component of the work. I think everybody should have comprehensive end of life training anyway, because most of us at some point will serve in some capacity to somebody who's dying or elderhood or grief or loss. I wish that these are the skills that we learned in school other than the Pythagorean theorem. I don't remember the last time I used that, but I'm using compassion and active listening every day. So it'd be great if we had some like solid skills, human skills, people skills.
Yeah, and if every person who desires to be a death doula would accept being an educator as part of that job, wherever you
Yeah.
go, whatever you do, you will be educating people.
All the time, and it gets tiring sometimes. You know, I was on a flight recently, and the person making chit chat next to me said, "So what do you do?" And I knew we had 6 hours, a long one across the country, and I took a deep breath because I was tired already. And I thought, is this the time that I tell them that I do nails for a living? But no, I told them, and then we talked about it a little
And
bit, and then eventually I fell asleep or got bored and stopped talking, and then that was it. But my hope is that I planted a seed. Maybe next time somebody in their lives is getting close to the end of life or needs additional support, they'll find one in their area.
yeah, exactly. And a number of years ago, when I was looking at how did the natural birth movement take off in our country way back in the 60s and 70s, and I realized media played a big role in that. And I think media is crucial and essential today for this movement that we're in. And you have done a really big part of being out there, being interviewed, writing articles. And so I'm really grateful to you because you've made a lot of inroads with the popular media.
Thank you, Karen. I'm trying. But let me tell you what, sometimes I really just want to sit in a hammock and stare at the sky a
Yeah.
bunch. Yeah.
I understand that. Well, I mean, I have to just ask this as kind of a fangirl of what was it like doing the docu-series Limitless with Chris Hemsworth? That really intrigued me. I haven't watched it yet, but I want to know what that was like for you.
It was awesome. He is so earnest and gentle and thoughtful. And I was surprised by that. You know, I think A-list celebrity, but he was so down to earth. He went with all the things that BJ and I created and put forth for him. All the questions that we asked, he responded to. He had some ongoing conversations even after the camera stopped rolling. He was really into it. It was great. It was great. And I think I'm also grateful to Darren Aronofsky, who was the producer on it, whose idea was producer director. His idea was to get the conversations about mortality out there in a real way, and they we really went there, and I'm so grateful.
That's really amazing. So now I know definitely need to watch that. But if what I understand, the earlier episodes in the series were more about talking about longevity and how do we expand our lifeline in a way and live longer. And so it blew my mind that they actually came around in the very last series to talk about death and dying. And then we can't live forever. So how do we accept mortality? And I think that's perfect.
Isn't it so wonderful and so thoughtful? You know, you spent 5 episodes just giving people all types of tools and tricks on how to live better, longer, and then at the end say, "Well, but if you can't, since you won't, how do you deal with elderhood and mortality?" It's great. I thought it was
Wow.
great. It was fun
Yeah,
too.
yeah, really powerful. So that's on Disney, right?
Yeah,
Disney Plus, or I
Disney
don't know
Plus.
what it is anymore. Disney. Yeah, I encourage people to watch that after they read the book, of course. Briefly, Perfectly Human. And so, one thing that I wanted to ask you about too, that I loved this statement from your book: those who sit on the fringe in life can more easily get close to the fringe in death. That is so powerful to me. And I think of all the people that I've met who've been drawn into this kind of work, working in all kinds of areas as funeral directors or in around the end of life, who probably would describe themselves as being on the fringe in their lives. And so I just wanted you to talk about that a little bit.
I hope nobody takes offense to this, but one thing that I love so much about this work is how many fellow weirdos I meet. People that are just down to jump into the deep, murky waters right off the bat, and who have found their own ways of living this life outside of the societal constructs of how we should do it. And I find that those are the folks that really do a great job in the death space, or really are actually even drawn to it, because we're already used to life outside the dominant paradigms. So many of the folks that come into the Going with Grace doula training program are people that inhabit a whole host of identities, people that have a lot of intersections of identities and are okay with that. And I think that means that we're able to support people at various points in their life cycle, and also be able to support those that are actually on the fringe in life also at death. It's key and necessary.
So true. And it's a really important message to get out that this death space is welcoming and inclusive and open in terms of, I mean, it's a good place to come here and work with us, come here and be part of this movement. For one thing, because we need diversity in the practitioners who work in this area in all possible ways. And it makes it's what we need to do in order to improve end of life care in general, is to bring in everyone with their different perspectives and how they're looking at the end of life and the journey they're pursuing, and even their life story and what that has taught them.
I absolutely agree. Recently, I was on an interview with somebody who asked me about why I didn't think that there were more folks of color or queer folks or LGBTIQA folks in the end of life space. And I was surprised by that question, because if I'm looking at the corner of the work that I've created, it is all of that. It's absolutely all of that. And so I think it's a greater conversation or discussion to be had by other folks that are actually seeing that, because that's not what I'm seeing currently. You know, when I look out at the students in the courses, they look like everything. They're all types of ages, different types of abilities. They're all types of different pronouns, neo-pronouns. Folks are everybody. They're everybody. I wish all end of life spaces look like that.
Oh, so true. And I had the privilege of attending Endwell in Los Angeles last November, and I spent some time just stepping back and just observing the people who were there, and it was just a fantastic tapestry of people of all ages and races and ethnicities and gender orientation, and every single person was so excited about the work they were doing, going around and listening to these conversations like, I weave bamboo caskets for people, and I help people with cremation and I do this and I loan people my trailer so they can use it for their end of life care. It's like I was just blown away, like the diversity of the people, the creativity in that group. And it gave me this tremendous hope for where we're headed as a movement.
I have a lot of hope for where we're headed as a movement. I have a lot of hope given the students that come to through the training course and what they are up to and how the work lives in them and what they're creating. You know, you were offering a welcome to anybody who's interested in this community to join us. And I also just want to add that no matter what anybody's background is, there's space here. And I think a lot of folks think that you need to have a medical background or I think it's kind of strange that I'm a lawyer as a background with this, but no matter what it is that you do, there's always, always, always space. I can think of early students that were into all types of things. There was one student that was a hairdresser, and she was thinking, well, she needed to put her hairdresser work down in order to pick this up. But what she started doing was offering haircuts at an elder care facility near her, and then ended up like brushing hair, taking care of people's hair as they were in the active dying stage, caring for their hair after they died. It's still there's a place for every skill and training that we have to live in this space as well, and it's necessary. We need it. We need you. Please come. We need
It
you.
it's so true because the dying process incorporates every aspect of living, every aspect of our life. It doesn't just disappear. Our hair still grows. We still need support in all of these areas, even as we're dying. And it makes the care so much better. I think that's one of the things that hospice has been lacking in the past is that it's such a medical model and it overemphasizes medically trained people and medicine's fine for what it is, but it's one more narrow, limited view of what's happening and cannot possibly meet all the needs of any individual at the end of life.
I agree. I think it's really a call to action for more holistic care, caring for the entire individual as they're dying, and also a big call to action for all different types of people to also enter into it. Because holistic care involves also looking at all the intersections of their identities while they're dying, because all parts of them are dying, and honoring all those things, not just the ones that we understand and can relate to, but the ones that we can stay curious about, the ones that we don't understand, but still say, that was you, that is your life, and I honor it. I'm going to see you all the way into the grave with it.
Mm, I really love that. And it feels to me, I know some hospices are starting to embrace the death doula movement. I don't know if that's enough, or I don't know if that will be helpful to death doulas to be connected with hospice. I know it's helpful to hospice. Hospice needs that so much, the extra care that death doulas could provide. But I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. Is it a good thing for death doulas to get hired by hospices?
I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. I think having somebody on the team who has a different perspective or orientation toward the care is useful. I think there's a lot of education that doulas do of several members of the team. I can think of some of the times where I got to work with somebody who had a strong hospice team around them and how wonderfully held they were through the entire process because no matter the needs, they were filled and felt. Um, I think it's a great thing. I want
Mm.
more. I also want doulas to be able to get jobs. Like, I don't want all doulas to have to be entrepreneurs. I wish that we could go inside someplace to fill out an application and get paid to do the work rather than sit down and write cold emails and marketing materials. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'm envisioning, I think we should have doulas in every oncology clinic. I think even other doctors' offices, because every medical practice, no matter what the specialty, deals with end of life issues and death and dying. And I think a doula could be so helpful when we complain doctors don't talk enough about end of life because they don't have enough time with patients. They need a doula then. They need someone whose entire job is having those conversations, who will come in and be with patients. And I think that's why there's just this unlimited work for doulas in different settings. So even if you're a doula who can't imagine doing a bedside vigil and doesn't want to do that kind of hands-on care, you could be in the doctor's office and having powerful end of life conversations with people.
Absolutely. You could be in the lawyer's office
Mhm.
because estate planning attorneys are filling out wills and trusts all the time. And at the end of it is an advance directive thrown in there. And so somebody walks into a lawyer's office thinking that they're going to get their will done, which is an end of life conversation, but it's done pretty sanitized and very mechanical. And yes or no, you check some boxes, you go home. What if we approached it with the type of care that we understand that end of life conversations need? I heard of a doctor's office, I think it's in Finland, maybe, not a doctor, a lawyer's office, where they have hired a doula to have those end of life conversations with folks as they complete their end of life plans. How cool.
Oh, I love that.
Me
And I
too.
think I think it's really needed. I saw a study of how a study done on how often were people's end of life wishes as stated in their advance directives actually honored at the end of life. And this was in a hospital, and the statistics were bad, that people's wishes were not actually being met. But one of the conclusions they came to is that people changed their minds, or that people didn't really even understand what they were doing when they filled out the forms. And I'm saying those are the people who checked off the boxes in their attorney's office. No one ever talked to them or told them anything, so they didn't understand what they were checking.
And also at that stage, was there somebody saying, "Hey, this is what you said before, this is what's happening now. How are you feeling about it? What changed? What feels the same? What values are you making this decision based upon?" Like just somebody to be present for the depth of conversation required would be amazing. In schools, in all hospitals, in fire departments, police departments, like we need doulas everywhere. If it's up to me, we're gonna have doulas in every part of society. I'm hopeful.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I think that's so important and so powerful, which is why I want to see doulas stay encouraged and
Yeah,
believe that there are going to be more and more opportunities, and we're pushing, I think, toward a tipping point. I hope where
yeah,
those opportunities will become available. But part of it, it's just talking about these ideas and putting it out there into the universe, so that
yeah,
maybe someone listening says, "Oh, I could have a death doula work with me," in
absolutely.
and the value of that. So it seems to me like there are more and more people getting trained as death doulas. So they're everywhere, I hope.
Yeah, we are.
Maybe rural areas are lacking, but
Some, but also I can't remember where this person was from. I'd never heard of the town before, but they were coming from a rural part of the country to our most recent end of life training in-person retreat. And I was so grateful that they were there because I think doulas are popping up in more and more places. I wanted to share something that gave me a lot of hope when I heard this, but I got called in by a Fortune 500 company, a big, 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 big money company, to give a talk on what doulas do because they had recently instituted a death doula benefit so that all of their employees, I think in the United States of America, could get reimbursed for up to $2,000 for using a doula for
wow,
themselves or a family member or anybody they described as family. And so
wow.
exactly. Now, we still need to do a lot more education about what doulas do. We need to continue to destigmatize talking about death so that when the time comes, these employees know that they can get this benefit. Their loved one, whoever it is that they care for, can get some services. They can get reimbursed, etc. Because of that, doulas are soon, I think, going to get more work overall. I'm super optimistic about this, but realistically, I mean, like, all my eggs are in this basket anyway. So I hope I'm optimistic about it.
Well, are you doing doula trainings right now? Is there anything to let us know about, or
We're always doing trainings. We're always doing trainings. We just wrapped an in-person retreat in Lake Arrowhead, California. We have a couple of online trainings coming up this year. We have another retreat later on this year in October. We always have self-study available. And then on top of that, we have a business development course for doulas that need some support in getting businesses up and running, if that's what they choose to do. And overall, we offer a wide variety of things to support folks that are interested in the conversation around mortality or interested in becoming a doula to get some training. Yeah.
is all of that on the website goingwithgrace.com?
Everything is on the website.
Everything's there. Okay.
Everything's on the website. We also have the Death Doula Den, which is an ongoing monthly subscription where it's 14 bucks a month, where for that amount of money you get access to a live webinar a month, but also we have a really wide library. We have over 50 or 60 recordings of folks that are doing cool things in the end of life space that can serve as continuing education for doulas as well.
Mm, that's really wonderful. And it creates a community for doulas, because I think probably in some areas doulas may be practicing, but they don't have a lot of peers where they live. So to have an online community would be really nice.
Come make friends.
Yeah, definitely. We all need that support. And so your book, I want to mention again, Briefly Perfectly Human. And I know it comes out in the middle of April. Is that
It
right?
does. Yeah, the 16th.
And so, well, that'll actually be, but when this airs, it will actually be after it's come out. But where will people be able to get a hold of the book?
That's a great question. I think in the usual places you can buy books. Amazon is not my go-to, but you can find it there. You can find it at bookshop.org. You can probably also find it in a decent amount of local bookstores. So please respect, please honor, please support your local booksellers.
Right. And yeah, go to your bookstore and request the book because then they'll order it and then they'll recognize they need to keep ordering it and keep it on hand in the bookstore if they don't have it already.
Thanks for that tip. I didn't know that.
And then you just recorded the audiobook as well. Is that right?
I did. I did. It was tough. It was really tough.
Oh, but it will be so worth it for because some people love listening and to be able to hear your voice telling your stories, that's going to be really powerful.
I hope so. I hope so. It was an interesting type of exposure therapy to be sitting in a room someplace just speaking out, my highest moments, some of the most challenging ones, client stories, just hearing it all come to life, fed back into my ear through the headphones. It was like, wow, this is a trip. It was a good time though.
Wow. Well, I'm so impressed with what you've done. It's such a beautiful book. It's being published by Harper Collins, which is a big deal. And it's great because they have such good distribution. So they're going to help get it out there everywhere where it needs to be. And so I feel proud of you. I'm just so
Oh,
proud of your accomplishment and so
thank
happy,
you.
happy that you've
Thank
done
you.
this and created this.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you. My hope as always is to continue like pushing the conversation forward, but I hope that since my book is being published by HarperCollins, it makes more space for people that want to write about death and dying to get published by the Big Five, for them to know that there's an audience for it, that people want it, so that we can also like collectively keep moving this conversation forward. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, yeah, so very true. Thanks for being a pioneer there and in so many ways with media because you're going to help everyone else, you know, get noticed or get articles published, just because you've already kind of blazed a trail in that media space. So I appreciate that.
I hope so. I hope that's what it's all worth. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, Alua, it's such a joy to talk to you. And I'm honored that I've been able to know you at least through 6 years of your journey and your path.
Me too. Thank you also so much for all the work that you do for us in this community. Because I remember years ago, End of Life University was it. It was where I sought resources. I came to listen to the things, the podcasts that you had done, to look at your works, read your books. So thank you also so much for the path that you've created for the rest of us.
Well, thank you. Thanks. It's good to hear that. It's funny how, starting out at the very beginning, when not knowing if anyone would ever listen to any of this, but it's kind of a joy now to come full circle and see that even in the beginning years, it made a difference.
Absolutely. It makes a difference.
Yes, well, that's what we're all doing here and what we're all about. And I'm so honored that you took time to talk to me today because I know you're really busy right now.
I
And I,
am, but like I told you, this is the one I was very excited about because you know what I'm talking about.
yeah,
It's great.
yeah, I'm sure you've done plenty of interviews where the person doesn't really want to talk about death, so they like to ask you about any other thing in your book.
Yeah, absolutely. Or they're like, "What is a death doula?" But here we already have a nice common frame of understanding for the work and how to honor human life and all. So it's really, really very wonderful to get to talk to you about this.
Well, yeah, so it's been a pure pleasure. So thank you and best wishes with your book and everything else that you're doing, Elua.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Alua and that you'll get her book, but also check out her website, goingwithgrace.com, for all the trainings and offerings that she has available there. And remember, I'll be back next week with another interview to share with you. And until then, take care and be well.